Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. The night was heavy with the scent of damp wood and rotting fruit from the market stalls. Behind a discarded wheelbarrow, hidden from view, a young woman in her early 20s crouched low, biting into her sleeve to muffle her screams. Her legs trembled violently, soaked in blood and tears. She had tried to hide the pregnancy for months, binding her belly with cloth and lying to her boss about her morning sickness. The child's father had vanished when he learned of it, a man she loved who never even stayed long enough to hear the heartbeat. With no money, no family, and nowhere to turn, desperation had carved cruelty into her heart. As the infant's final wail rang out into the cold air, she wrapped him in the remains of her faded scarf, kissed his forehead, and laid him carefully on the wet dirt like a parcel of shame. "I'm sorry," she whispered through clenched teeth. "I can't give you what you need. Maybe someone else will." Then, like a thief in her own tragedy, she vanished into the shadows, leaving behind the child and a shredded prayer for mercy. The baby's cries echoed long after she disappeared, cutting through the darkness like a blunt knife. Rats scurried nearby, and flies circled the blood-stained cloth. He was no more than 3 minutes old, yet the world had already written him off. The moon offered no comfort, only a pale light that made the dirt look like a grave. Vendors packing up their goods after the market day paid the sound no attention. Some assumed it was a stray animal. Others, too tired or hardened by their own poverty, walked past without looking. Time crawled, and the cold intensified. The baby's wails softened into whimpers. Hunger began to set in, and his tiny fingers curled into the mud, as if trying to grasp some piece of the world that wouldn't let go. No one came. Not a hand. Not a glance. Just the slow, indifferent passing of time in a town that had seen too much to care. Then, just as dawn threatened to break the darkness, a figure shuffled through the alleyway. Barefoot and muttering to herself, she wore layers of mismatched clothes. Skirts tied over gowns, a blouse on her head like a crown. Her hair was matted, her eyes wild, but her steps were oddly graceful. The townspeople called her Mama Grace, once a woman of charm and elegance, now reduced to madness and ridicule. She paused, cocked her head to the side like a listening bird, then followed the sound of the soft whimper. When she saw him, tiny, dirty, almost lifeless, something deep within her shifted. "Oh," she breathed. My baby has come again." Without hesitation, she lifted him from the mud, rocked him gently, and held him to her chest. The baby clung to her warmth like it was the sun. Mama Grace began to sing, an old hymn half forgotten. And as the sky turned purple with morning, she wrapped him in her own skirt and whispered through broken teeth, "You will not die in the dirt, my little destiny. Not while I breathe." Mama Grace wandered through the back of the marketplace with a new sense of purpose that morning. Vendors were just beginning to open their stalls when they saw her, cradling a wrapped bundle like treasure. Some scoffed. Others rolled their eyes. "The mad woman has picked up a doll," one said. "Or maybe she stole someone's child," another muttered. But Mama Grace didn't hear them. Her mind, usually scattered with chaotic thoughts and haunted whispers, felt oddly clear as she found a dry patch of cement behind an abandoned kiosk. Sitting down, she unwrapped the baby, stared at his trembling lips, and instinctively lifted her torn blouse. To the amazement of none but the heavens, milk flowed from her breasts, unused but still alive. The baby latched on as though his spirit recognized the madness in her wasn't dangerous. She sang softly to him, humming lullabies from her forgotten youth, as her eyes glistened with a kind of joy she hadn't felt in decades. The onlookers watched in a mix of disgust and confusion. "Is she breastfeeding a baby in public?" someone exclaimed. A group of teenage girls laughed and pointed. "Maybe she thinks she's his real mother," they mocked. But Grace remained unfazed. In her fractured world, where memories danced like fireflies, this child was a miracle. She named him Destiny right then, declaring to the air, "He has come to fulfill a promise God once whispered to me." Her words made no sense to those who heard them, but they were laced with certainty. The town had always seen her as a nuisance, a woman who had once been beautiful and generous, but had now become a shadow. Yet that morning, something changed. Even the birds seemed to chirp a bit closer to where she sat. Though the world had thrown her away, she had found someone to love, someone to protect with the last working piece of her mind. Destiny grew quickly in her arms. Though she had no steady shelter, she knew the dry corners of the town better than anyone. She stole food when she had to, begged when she could, and even danced in front of buses for spare change. But every night, she held him close, whispering strange blessings into his ears. He responded to her with laughter, clinging to her as if he, too, sensed her brokenness was made for his healing. They slept on flattened cartons, shared sachets of water, and lived under the mercy of strangers' leftovers. But what Destiny received was something money couldn't buy: devotion, even if it came from a place the world called madness. Mama Grace began to be seen not just as a mad woman, but as the mad woman with a child. And for once, there was a spark of something sacred in the madness. Her arms may have trembled, her words may have slurred, but her love for that child was as fierce and unwavering as a mother lion guarding her cub in a world that had forgotten how to care. Before the madness, Grace was a woman of rare warmth and gentleness. She had been the kind of person who would skip her own meals to feed the children in the orphanage where she volunteered. She worked at the local foster home and was beloved by all. Children clung to her, called her Auntie Grace, and many believed her touch had healing power. Her life was simple, but filled with meaning. On weekends, she coordinated the children's department at her church, crafting lessons from empty cartons and crayons she bought with her own little earnings. Every child adored her. She had a laugh that danced in your chest, and a spirit that drew even the most broken children into comfort. And then came Charles, a gentle, wealthy widower who fell in love with her humility. Their love story was beautiful and pure. He proposed with tears in his eyes and placed a ring on her finger during a Sunday service. For Grace, everything felt perfect. But not everyone was happy. Her younger sister, Patricia, who had always lived in Grace's shadow, burned with envy. She couldn't understand how someone so ordinary, so quiet, could win the heart of a man with status and wealth. Patricia plotted. She smiled at Grace during the day, but at night, she whispered to herself about how she would undo everything. On the evening of Grace's engagement dinner, Patricia offered her a meal, laced with a foreign substance bought from a backdoor chemist. "It will only make her forget the wedding," the woman had said. But the poison did more. That night, Grace collapsed during her prayer. She woke up a different person. Her words were jumbled, her memories fragmented. She became aggressive, then confused, and then frightening. Charles rushed her to hospitals, flew in specialists, but nothing worked. In less than a month, the once loved woman of the church became the mad woman who talked to herself and shouted Bible verses in the market. When Patricia saw how bad it had gotten, she struck. She comforted Charles, offered to help him recover. And soon, like a slow-moving betrayal, she crept into his life and replaced her sister. Grace was admitted to a psychiatric facility, but she escaped one night during a breakdown. With no one left to care for her, she became a wanderer. The woman who once clothed orphans was now wrapped in garbage bags. The woman who once braided little girls' hair now had knots in her own. And no one ever spoke of what happened. Her story became an urban myth, a cautionary tale, a whisper in the wind. Until Destiny came. Until the child she found in the dirt gave her something her sister could never steal: purpose. The wedding that never happened was the beginning of Grace's descent into nothingness. Charles, in his grief and confusion, watched the woman he loved spiral into a state so unrecognizable that even her shadow seemed foreign. He tried to hold on at first. He prayed beside her hospital bed, read her favorite psalms aloud, and wept in secret, refusing to accept that the same woman who had once calmed weeping orphans now bit the fingers of nurses and screamed at her own reflection. Her eyes were wild, distant, almost haunted, but sometimes, just sometimes, they flickered with brief recognition when she saw children. It was in those moments that her lips would tremble, and she'd hum forgotten lullabies. But Charles couldn't stay. He was a man of status, a businessman expected to smile at dinners and shake hands with governors. Patricia began to ease his burden. She told him it was time to move on, that Grace would never come back, and that he needed to save himself. Slowly, like erosion on stone, her words wore him down. Within a year, Charles married Patricia. The wedding was quiet, not because of grief, but shame. No one from the church came. The staff whispered. But Charles stood silent, lifeless in his suit. Patricia, on the other hand, beamed. She had won. Grace, meanwhile, was released from the facility when funding for her care dried up. Her family, led by Patricia, claimed she was a burden. She wandered into the streets, barefoot and bare-minded. From one church to another, she begged for help, but no one recognized her. Or rather, no one wanted to. The woman who once served children during Christmas was now chased away from the gates of the same buildings. She settled in the market because the noise drowned the screams in her mind. She'd dance randomly, laugh at silence, and fight invisible demons. People mocked her, but some whispered that she used to be someone important, a woman loved by children and adored by a wealthy man. But rumors fade fast in places where survival screams louder than memory. Years passed, and Grace's clothes tore more. Her feet toughened from walking endlessly without shoes, and her voice grew hoarse from shouting the names of children who once clung to her. But then came the child in the dirt, the abandoned boy who didn't recoil from her touch, the infant who latched onto her breast without fear. She called him Destiny, not by accident, but by revelation. In her fragmented mind, she believed he was her son, sent to her by God as a reward for all she had lost. She bathed him in sachet water, wrapped him in rags, and sang to him in the language of a broken heart. With him in her arms, she was no longer a mad woman. She was a mother again. The world still mocked her, but she no longer heard them. She had something more important than sanity. She had love. And in that love, even madness had meaning. Grace began to wear him like a second skin. Whether she was dancing through traffic or picking half-eaten bananas from the trash, Destiny was always pressed against her chest or balanced on her back with a torn wrapper. She spoke to him as though he were a prince, narrating her life aloud in songs and riddles. "My destiny will become a king," she'd chant while twirling before a group of children. "He will speak for those who have no tongues and eat for those who have no hands." The market women sneered. Some threatened to call child services. "You're crazy," one spat. "Give that child away before you kill him." But Grace would growl, crouch like a lioness, and snarl at anyone who came too close. She'd clutch him tight and whisper, "I'll bite the devil himself before I let you touch my son." No one dared test her after she actually bit a man's hand for trying to snatch Destiny from her one morning. He had been left bleeding and stunned, more by the intensity of her love than the wound. Destiny grew, and so did the ridicule. Children would gather around the dusty spot where Grace and Destiny slept at night and mock him. "Mad woman's child," they'd yell, tossing pebbles and trash. "Is your mother a ghost or a monkey?" Sometimes older boys would snatch his sachet water and run, laughing as he cried. But Destiny never fought back. He would crawl into Mama Grace's lap, press his ear to her chest, and listen to her heartbeat until he fell asleep. Grace, despite her madness, noticed everything. She began teaching him in her own strange way. "This is how you count," she'd say, lining up bottle caps. "This is red," she'd whisper, pointing at blood on her foot. "Don't ever steal. If you must beg, beg with dignity." People were shocked at how the boy seemed so different from her. He never spoke to himself, never screamed or fought. He was quiet, observant, sad-eyed, but he carried an odd calmness, as though he knew he was despite the insults. Destiny started forming full sentences by age 3. He called Grace Mama, and called God the friend Mama talks to. He never asked about his real parents, not because he wasn't curious, but because he didn't need answers. His world began with the woman who held him in rags and fed him from her chest while muttering hymns. That was enough. He couldn't understand why other kids had clean clothes or why people crossed the road to avoid them. All he knew was that Mama Grace would dance for him whenever he cried, and her songs, though off-key and sometimes scary, always made him feel safe. One day, a church group offered to take him in. "We can give him a better life," they said. But Grace screamed so violently, flailing and foaming at the mouth, that they left terrified. Destiny clung to her leg that night, whispering, "I don't want a better life. I want my mama." And under the flicker of a distant streetlight, she kissed his forehead and whispered, "Then you'll stay, and one day you'll be the better life." By the time Destiny turned 6, he had memorized the rhythm of survival. He knew how to make a fire from nylon bags, how to drink from leaking pipes without swallowing too much rust, and how to hide when people came with cameras pretending to be helpers. The town had gotten used to him and Mama Grace, like a twisted attraction nobody wanted to touch, but everyone wanted to talk about. He sat at the edge of classrooms during open days, just to hear the teachers speak. He never attended school, but he learned by listening. Mama Grace taught him to write letters in the dirt. His A looked like a broken ladder. His B was always upside down, but his smile when he got them right could light up an entire street. Still, the mocking never stopped. Children threw stones while chanting, "Why doesn't your mother wear shoes?" Others would mimic Mama Grace's gibberish, twisting their mouths and shaking their heads like mad people. Destiny would lower his gaze, tighten his grip on his rock collection, and walk away. One day, a group of boys cornered him behind a shed. They pushed him down, smeared his face with ash, and tied a rag around his head like Mama Grace wore. "Now you're a proper mad boy," they laughed. When he returned to Mama Grace, bleeding and bruised, she cried, not in madness, but in rage. That night, she walked through the town square barefoot, shouting, "You will not kill my child before God's eyes." People came out of their homes to laugh and film her with their phones. Destiny just stood in the shadows, tears streaming down his cheeks. He hated being weak. He hated how she suffered just because she loved him. That night, he whispered into her ear while she slept beside a gutter, "One day, Mama, I'll build a house for you, with a bed, with food. You won't dance for coins anymore." She mumbled something in her sleep, something about angels and bread, but Destiny understood it as a promise. The days that followed were harder. People began saying he was getting too old to be raised by a mad woman. Rumors spread that social workers were coming again. Mama Grace became more erratic. She hid Destiny during the day, made him cover himself with leaves, and told him never to speak to men in uniforms. But he was tired of hiding, tired of being laughed at, tired of watching his mother dance in the heat just to earn 10 naira. He began to sit at the back of church services, hoping maybe someone would help without trying to take him away. But no one did. They only pointed and whispered. It was on one of those Sundays, while watching the other children eat rice and meat, that he said quietly to himself, "This world is not kind, but I will be." And with that, something in Destiny's heart hardened, not into hate, but into resolve. The smell of sweat engine fumes and open drainage defined Destiny's world. By the time he was 8, he had outgrown the tattered clothes Mama Grace constantly scavenged for him, yet he wore them proudly. His feet were always bare, caked in brown dust, cut by broken glass, but he never complained. He had learned early that pain was normal, that warmth was a luxury, and that love, real love, did not wear perfume or drive fancy cars. It walked in torn slippers, sang lullabies with a cracked voice, and shielded you from rain with nothing but its own fragile body. He remained close to Mama Grace at all times, often mimicking her expressions unconsciously. He'd tilt his head when she did, tap his feet when she danced, and hum along to her strange songs even if he didn't understand their meanings. His heart, though worn by poverty and laughter of others, remained oddly pure. People who looked closely noticed that. He'd help blind beggars cross the road, return dropped coins to strangers, and give his last biscuit to another child with more hunger in their eyes. But the mockery continued. Every time he ventured near a group of children, they scattered like he carried disease. Some called him Market Demon. Others claimed he was cursed. Teachers in nearby schools avoided eye contact when he stood at the gates to listen during morning assemblies. He would sit behind one tree, holding on to every word said by the headmistress, then recite them back to Mama Grace with excitement later that night. "Mama, today the woman said God helps those who help themselves." And Mama Grace would nod in rhythm, clapping her hands like she was at revival. "Then we must help ourselves, oh," she'd declare before spinning around in one of her nonsensical dances. Though her sanity danced on a blade's edge, her love was unwavering. She washed his sores with warm sachet water, used ground charcoal to draw on his body as protection, and would scream into the night sky whenever he coughed. "Don't take him from me. I've lost enough." Yet even with this love, Destiny began to feel the weight of difference. He knew he wasn't like the other children, not because of what he lacked, but because of what he carried. Shame that wasn't his. He started to ask questions. "Mama, who gave birth to me?" Grace would pause, stare at him blankly, then brush his cheek. "God gave you to me through the ground," she'd say. It confused him. The ground? Did other children come from hospitals, and he came from dirt? He lay awake most nights thinking about it. There were no mirrors in his world, only puddles. But in those puddles, he saw a boy with tired eyes and hopeful lips. A boy who had nothing, but felt everything. A boy who told himself, "Maybe one day, my feet won't be this dirty. Maybe one day, the dirt won't matter." And he clung to that hope like it was the only thing keeping his spirit from dissolving into the madness that had claimed the only person who truly loved him. The rainy season came with a vengeance that year. Streets overflowed, gutters gushed like rivers, and makeshift shelters were swept away like forgotten leaves. Mama Grace and Destiny took refuge under a narrow zinc shed behind the abattoir, dirty, rusted, and barely wide enough for both of them to sit. The rain hammered the metal like war drums, soaking everything within reach. Destiny curled into her arms, shivering, his lips purple with cold. Grace sang louder, her voice cracking as she tried to shield him with her own frail frame. "Rain, rain, go away, my baby has no roof today," she repeated the rhyme with increasing fervor, rocking back and forth as if trying to will the clouds into silence. Passers-by watched and laughed, some recording the scene with their phones, mocking the mad woman raising a bush rat. Others whispered prayers of pity, but kept walking. Pity was cheap, compassion required sacrifice, and no one was willing to offer that. Hours passed before the storm eased, but the humiliation lingered. As the streets cleared, a group of school children passed by, laughing with umbrellas in hand and dry uniforms. One of them recognized Destiny. "Look, that's the mad woman's boy. He bathes in gutter water." The laughter exploded. One boy even mimicked Grace's chant, spinning in circles like she did. Destiny stood still, drenched and trembling, not from the cold, but from the shame crawling up his skin. Mama Grace began clapping and dancing, unaware of the insult, thinking it was a celebration. "Yes-o, sing to the Lord. Destiny will go to school soon. My child will read book." Her voice cracked with pride while they laughed harder. Destiny felt something inside him collapse. He wanted to disappear. In that moment, he didn't feel like her son. He felt like a problem, an ugly, unwanted shadow of someone else's delusion. That night, Destiny didn't eat the soaked bread she had saved for him. He stared into the flickering candlelight of a kiosk nearby and whispered, "God, why me?" He didn't know if God listened to street boys. He didn't know if God even knew where he lived. But he prayed anyway, asking for warmth, asking for acceptance, asking for a day when he wouldn't be mocked for the love that raised him. Mama Grace hummed beside him, chewing noisily on a dry piece of roasted plantain. She suddenly reached for him, pulled him close, and rubbed his head. "You are not dirty," she said without warning. "You are rain-washed. You are mine." He didn't respond, but a tear slipped down his cheek. Those words didn't fix everything. They didn't end the hunger, the shame, or the rejection. But they meant the world to a boy who felt like he didn't belong anywhere. That night, he slept with her heartbeat in his ear and dreamed of clean clothes and a classroom where no one knew his past. It happened on a Tuesday morning, just as Destiny was helping Mama Grace clean their corner beside the drainage where they slept. A black government van pulled up near the main road. Two uniformed officers stepped out, followed by a woman in glasses holding a clipboard. She was from Child Welfare Services, stern, middle-aged, and convinced she was doing the right thing. "We've received multiple complaints," she said to no one in particular, eyes scanning the filth around them. Destiny froze, sensing danger. Mama Grace didn't understand at first. She smiled at the woman, held out a sachet of water like a peace offering, and said, "You've come to visit my son, yes? He's the next president." But the woman didn't smile back. She signaled the officers. They approached with practiced detachment. "We're here for the boy," one of them said. "He's being taken into protective custody." That word, protective, was a cruel joke. There was nothing protective about the way they grabbed his arm. Mama Grace exploded into rage. She lunged forward, biting, screaming, scratching with the strength of a lioness. "He's mine. Leave my baby. I born am with my tears." Her screams pierced through the market square like a fire alarm. People gathered to watch. Some cheered the officers. Others begged them to be gentle. But Grace was inconsolable. She tore her own clothes, pounded her chest, and wailed as if her soul was being yanked from her body. Destiny was crying too, thrashing against the officers, yelling, "Mama! Mama, don't let them take me." But the van door closed with a thud, drowning his cries. Mama Grace chased the vehicle barefoot down the muddy road, screaming until her voice broke into rasps. Her skirt flew loose. Her hair became a wild mess in the wind. She finally collapsed in the street, clutching a stone as if it were his hand. That night, the entire town couldn't sleep. Mama Grace wandered from house to house, banging on doors and screaming Destiny's name. "You thief him! Give me back my boy! He's mine!" She stood in front of churches, throwing sand and tearing down posters. She even stormed the local radio station, demanding airtime to call for her missing child. People began avoiding her completely now, afraid of the intensity of her grief. But to Destiny, now trapped in a sterile room with strangers who smelled of disinfectant, none of that mattered. He couldn't sleep. He lay curled on a strange bed, clutching the rock Grace once gave him and whispering over and over, "I'll come back for you, Mama. I'll come back." The walls were too white, too quiet, too clean. It made Destiny feel like he didn't belong, like his very presence soiled the sterile air of the child welfare shelter. He had been brought to what they called a temporary holding home, a place with bunk beds, regulated meals, and polite but distant social workers who smiled more out of obligation than care. He was given a toothbrush, a plastic bucket, and 2 changes of clothing. But what he really needed was nowhere on the list. He needed her. The silence of the shelter at night was unbearable compared to the chaos of Mama Grace's world. There were no strange songs, no mad laughter, no rough lullabies. Just silence. Deafening, heartless silence. Destiny lay curled under his blanket on the first night, his fingers clutching the stone Mama Grace once gave him, the one she called your protector from dark spirits. He didn't understand what it meant, but it smelled like her, and that was enough to bring the tears rolling down his face. The other boys didn't talk to him. Most were rough, from troubled homes, angry at the world and quick to show it. One of them slapped Destiny on his second day for not answering a question fast enough. Another mocked him for the way he mumbled Mama Grace's songs under his breath while sweeping. Destiny didn't fight back, not because he was weak, but because he felt empty. His heart had been left behind in the street where the van took him away. Mealtime felt like punishment. Food that had no love in it never satisfied. The rice was hot but tasteless. The bread was soft but hollow. And every time he lifted a spoon, he remembered Mama Grace feeding him with her bare hands, singing broken hymns and smiling like he was royalty. He began to write. The shelter gave the children notebooks for emotional processing. Most scribbled jokes and drew crude cartoons. Destiny filled every page with letters to her. "Dear Mama," he wrote, "I'm sorry I couldn't fight harder. I miss your songs. I miss your smell. I miss our dirt." At night he often dreamed of her, But in those dreams, she was no longer mad. She wore clean clothes, her hair combed neatly, her voice clear. She held him and called him my little prince. Then he'd wake up, tears soaking his pillow. One night, he heard a soft whimper from across the room, one of the toughest boys crying in his sleep. Destiny sat up, walked over, and quietly placed the stone Mama Grace gave him beside the boy. "Hold this. It helps," he whispered. The boy didn't say anything, but didn't return it either. That night, Destiny realized something. Even in pain, Mama Grace had taught him how to give. And that lesson became his shield in that lonely place, the knowledge that even when you have nothing, you can still offer kindness. It wouldn't bring her back, but it would keep her alive in the only way he could manage, through the love she planted in him. 2 months after he arrived at the shelter, Destiny was assigned to a foster family. "They've agreed to take you in until a permanent home is found," the social worker said, as if he were luggage being passed from one stop to another. The couple who received him lived in a modest home on the outskirts of town. At first glance, they seemed decent. The man was quiet, the woman too cheerful. But Destiny soon realized that what they wanted was not a child to love, but a child to control. He was expected to wake at 4:30 a.m., fetch water, clean the compound, wash the couple's clothes, and even bathe their toddler. They called it training, but it was slavery dressed in Sunday clothes. Meals were sparse, mostly Gary and water, and he was beaten with a belt if he dared complain or showed signs of tiredness. At night, when the house went quiet, Destiny would lie on the cement floor of the storeroom they called his bedroom, hugging his legs, whispering, "I'll come back for you, Mama." The man had a habit of muttering cruel words under his breath whenever Destiny passed. "Mad woman's boy, better behave before her madness catches you too." The woman once told her friends that they had taken him in just for the little government token. Destiny heard it from the kitchen, and something in him cracked. He wanted to scream, to run, to disappear. But he stayed, not for them, but for the promise he carried inside. He held on to the dream of seeing Mama Grace again, of building a better life not just for her, but for himself. But the world didn't make it easy. At school, he still didn't fit in. Even in his clean uniform, the other children sensed something different in him. He didn't talk much. He didn't laugh like they did. His eyes looked older. He avoided sports, never ate lunch, and sat alone, drawing pictures of a woman in layers of tattered clothes and a boy holding her hand. Teachers noticed his brilliance, but mistook his silence for arrogance. One day he ran away. After being flogged for forgetting to close a gate, Destiny packed the only things he had, a broken pencil, a drawing of Mama Grace, and a sachet of soaked Gary, and vanished into the night. He tried to return to the market, to find her, but too much had changed. New vendors had taken over. The stall she once slept beside was now replaced with a fruit table. When he asked about her, people shrugged. "That mad woman? We think she died." His chest caved in. He couldn't breathe. He sat on the cold pavement and wept into his hands, feeling the weight of hopelessness like a mountain crushing his spine. A kind kiosk owner called the police. He was dragged back to the foster house, where punishment awaited. But even as they beat him that night, even as blood ran from his back, his soul screamed only one thing: "I'm coming, Mama. I'm still coming. One day I'll find you." Time moved like a lazy river, slow and cruel. Years passed, and Destiny transitioned from a scrawny, wide-eyed boy to a lanky teenager with sharp cheekbones and tired eyes. He had outgrown the foster home system, shuffled from one place to another, never staying long enough to be loved, but just long enough to be wounded. By 16, he had lived in 5 homes, endured dozens of beatings, and carried emotional bruises too deep for any bandage. But through it all, he held on to the memory of Mama Grace. Her voice lived in his head, not as gibberish anymore, but as prophecy. "You will become a king," she had said. "You will speak for the ones with no tongues." He didn't understand it then, but now he believed it. He began working small jobs, washing cars, cleaning gutters, and later learning how to fix phones from a kind repairman who took him in without asking too many questions. Though he still didn't know where Mama Grace was, or if she was even alive, he refused to stop searching. Whenever he had extra money, he traveled back to the market streets, asking questions, showing old sketches of her, sometimes getting chased away. But one day, he met a beggar who claimed to have seen her under the third mainland bridge, dancing and singing to a boy made of stone. Destiny's heart jolted. That was her. That had to be her. But he had no transport fare that day, no way to reach the bridge. He returned to his kiosk, clenched his jaw, and whispered to the wind, "Soon, Mama. Just a little longer." And so he worked harder. He built a reputation for being honest, humble, and brilliant. Customers returned not just for his skills, but for his strange wisdom. He would often say things like, "Riches mean nothing if your heart is homeless." Or, "The first home I ever knew didn't have walls. It had arms." People thought he was just poetic, but every line was for her. By 18, he had saved enough to rent a single-room apartment and buy his own second-hand phone repair tools. He lived alone, cooked his own meals, and wrote letters to Mama Grace in a journal he never showed anyone. His walls were covered in childlike drawings of her, always smiling, always holding his hand. He still didn't know who his birth parents were, and he didn't care. In his heart, he already had a mother, a mad woman who never abandoned him, a woman who gave him her milk, her songs, and her soul. He carried her inside him, like oxygen. Every achievement was for her. Every meal eaten on a table, every clean bath, every new customer. It was all to fulfill the vow he had made as a boy. "I will come back. And when I do, you'll never be called mad again." Destiny stood in front of the mall's restroom mirror, a cracked, blurry reflection staring back at him. It had been a long day at the roadside kiosk, where he fixed phones under the punishing sun. His black t-shirt clung to his chest with sweat, and the muscles in his arms trembled from fatigue. But it wasn't the physical exhaustion that gripped him. It was the heaviness in his chest, the kind that sat quietly behind the ribs and waited for silence to scream. He stared at himself for a long time, searching for the little boy who used to hide behind a mad woman's wrapper. But all he saw now was a man still wounded by love, still chasing a ghost everyone else had long forgotten. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Then, almost in a whisper, he said to the mirror, "I'm still coming for you, Mama. I haven't forgotten." And in that cracked reflection, he found clarity, not just of what he was running from, but what he was running towards. That evening, he returned to his small room and sat in the corner with his journal. He opened to a page he had marked years ago, a childish sketch of Mama Grace holding his hand beneath a storm cloud, her dress flapping like wings. Below it, he had written a single line, "I will build her a home." He traced the words with his finger and smiled. That promise had been the only constant in his life. Not foster homes, not the churches that turned him away, not the beatings or betrayals. It was the memory of a mad woman who sang to him, danced for him, bled for him. He remembered how she would laugh, not because she was happy, but because it was the only weapon she had against a world that had laughed at her first. Destiny whispered to himself that night, "I may not have much, but I will become a man worthy of her love. I will be her redemption." And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to cry, not from pain, but from the release of long-held sorrow. The next morning, something in Destiny shifted. He began to walk with more purpose, as though every step carried the weight of two lives, his and Mama Grace's. He redesigned his roadside kiosk, gave it a new name, Grace Fix Mobile Repairs. Passers-by asked about the name, and he'd simply smile and say, "It's for someone who fixed me first." The name caught attention. Soon, local customers poured in, not just for repairs, but because Destiny's gentleness and focus radiated a rare energy. He saved every naira, stopped buying things he didn't need, and even stopped eating out. He worked 12 hours daily, determined to expand his business. But behind every transaction, every handshake, every thank you, was one unspoken thought. With each phony fix, I'm one step closer to fixing her life too. That promise remained his compass, and he followed it with the kind of faith only a scarred child could understand. It was on a rainy Monday afternoon that everything changed. A tech blogger, whose phone Destiny had repaired a week prior, returned to the kiosk in a panic. "My phone. I dropped it in water again," he said breathlessly. Destiny laughed softly, took the phone, and in 10 minutes, had it up and running. The man was stunned. "You're a genius," he said, pulling out his camera. "What's your name again?" Destiny hesitated, then simply said, "Just call me Grace's son." That video, titled "The Boy Who Fixes Phones Like Magic," went viral overnight. The tech blogger's page had hundreds of thousands of followers, and soon people began showing up at Destiny's stall, some for repairs, others just to see the young man with sad eyes and steady hands. But Destiny didn't let the fame get to him. He still arrived early, still worked in silence, still saved every coin. The only difference was the whispers. "He's the madwoman's son, you know." But now, those words carried awe instead of mockery. Destiny was invited for interviews, offered scholarships, and even given a grant by a small business collective impressed by his humility. He declined most of the offers that took him away from town. "I'm looking for someone," he would say. "I can't leave until I find her." People didn't understand. They thought he was chasing shadows. But to him, every recognition, every opportunity, was simply a louder call to her, to let Mama Grace know her son hadn't forgotten. He expanded the kiosk into a small mobile shop, hired 2 street boys who had once stolen from him, and trained them for free. He told them, "We are not our mistakes. We are what we survive." Those boys became fiercely loyal. They began calling him Boss G. Destiny hated the title, but he smiled. In a world where his name used to be synonymous with filth, it felt strangely redemptive to be seen now as a mentor, a builder, a man. One night, Destiny stood outside his shop and watched the sunset with his hands in his pockets. The sky was pink and gold, like a memory unfolding. He could hear Mama Grace's voice in his mind, chanting that same rhyme she used when he was a baby. "He will be a king of hands, not crowns." He chuckled quietly. "Mama, they know me now. They finally know your son." But he wasn't done. There was still one thing left. One soul he needed to find. Fame meant nothing if she wasn't there to see it. That week, he began a citywide search. He printed flyers with her old sketch and description. "Have you seen this woman? She answers to Grace. She talks to herself. She dances without music." Some called it a waste of time. Others joined the search. And for the first time, the world was looking for her, not to laugh, not to scorn, but to bring her home. Destiny's search led him to forgotten corners of the city. He spoke with beggars, drug addicts, and street vendors. He visited under bridges, slums, and abandoned buildings. He offered money to anyone who had seen a woman that fit Mama Grace's description. Some lied for the cash. Others truly tried to help. "There was a mad woman near Jibua Bridge who danced like she was on stage," one man said. Destiny's heart leaped. He ran there that same evening, but the woman was not Mama Grace. She was older, mute, and blind in one eye. Destiny wept under the bridge that night, whispering her name like a chant. "Mama, Mama." He remembered the time she shielded him from rain with her body, the way her laughter scared people but calmed his spirit. The deeper he searched, the more he realized how invisible the world made people like her. She could have died, and no one would have noticed. The thought crushed him. Days turned into weeks. Hope began to wear thin. But Destiny refused to stop. One day, while sitting at a buka to rest, he overheard an old woman talking about a mad woman under 3rd Mainland Bridge who calls every boy my prince. Destiny froze. "Excuse me, Ma," he interrupted gently. "Did you say she calls them my prince?" The woman nodded. "Yes, she even gives them wrappers to wear and sings lullabies. The boys there think she's a witch." Destiny didn't wait for her to finish. He grabbed his bag and rushed out. His heart raced as he boarded a bike. The sky darkened with an incoming storm, but he didn't care. It was as if every second delayed would rob him of breath. When he arrived at the bridge, the place was chaotic, noise, water, and filth everywhere. But then he heard it. A voice, hoarse but unmistakable, singing, "Rain, rain, go away, my baby has no roof today." He turned and saw her, older, smaller. Her clothes were layers of nylon and sack. Her hair was completely gray, her feet swollen. But it was her. Mama Grace. She was spinning slowly in the rain, singing to no one, holding a plastic doll. Destiny stood frozen. The world blurred. Tears rushed from his eyes. "Mama," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She didn't turn. He walked closer. "Mama, it's me, Destiny." She paused mid-spin, looked at him, and tilted her head. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound. No rain. Then she dropped the doll, walked toward him with cautious steps, touched his cheek, and whispered, "My baby came back." She collapsed into his arms. And under that noisy, filthy bridge, Destiny wept louder than he ever had. The boy from the dirt had returned, and the voice that once sang him to sleep had finally found its way home. Destiny carried Mama Grace gently, cradling her in his arms like she had once cradled him under the zinc shed behind the market. The onlookers under the bridge stared in confusion. Most had only known her as the eccentric woman who danced and shouted at invisible spirits. "Now the woman way day talked to stone," one said. "That's her son," another muttered. But Destiny didn't hear them. His tears soaked her hair as she clung to him tightly, murmuring broken phrases. "I told them you'd come. I told them my baby was not lost." He helped her sit down under a makeshift shelter by the water's edge. She was thinner than he remembered. Her eyes were sunken, her fingernails blackened by grime, but she was alive. She looked at him with wonder, brushing his cheek as if unsure he was real. Then she began to hum again, the same lullaby she sang while feeding him in the market all those years ago. He joined her softly, and for a moment the years dissolved. It was just a mother and her son, together again. He brought her home that same day. The neighbors whispered, some disapproving, others simply curious. A few muttered that he had become too successful to be associating with someone like that. But Destiny didn't care. He bathed her himself, gently washing her hair, clipping her nails, and dressing her in clean clothes. He removed every mirror in the room to avoid confusing her and painted the walls yellow, her favorite color, he remembered. A nurse came twice a day to check on her health, but Destiny insisted on handling most things himself. He prepared her meals, played her old favorite music, and sat beside her for hours while she mumbled stories of children he'd never met. She'd point at imaginary people in the air and call them by names. Sometimes she'd think Destiny was still a baby and would scold him for playing in the mud. But there were also moments of clarity, fleeting, precious moments, when she'd grip his hand tightly and whisper, "I knew you would be great, my Destiny. I knew it." He began documenting her progress in his journal, detailing every word she spoke, every smile she gave. It was his way of preserving her life, not just for himself, but for the world. "This woman," he wrote, "is not a madwoman. She is my sanctuary, my first pillow, my only mother." He canceled interviews, turned down offers, and ignored fame to care for her. People didn't understand why he would leave opportunity to stay beside someone the world had written off. But they didn't know the hunger of being unloved. They didn't know the warmth of madness that chose to love anyway. For Destiny, this was not a sacrifice, it was restoration. Every spoon of food he fed her, every hymn they hummed together, every story she half told in gibberish was a patch in the broken quilt of his soul. She had taken him in when he was dirt. Now, he would raise her from dust and give her the peace she had never known. Not because he had to, but because he remembered. Word spread quickly that the phone repair boy turned tech genius had brought a mentally unstable woman into his home. His mansion, now expanded and staffed with quiet respect, became the subject of gossip and judgment. Some thought he was cursed. Others assumed she was a witch who had hypnotized him. But Destiny never responded to the noise. He built her a garden at the back of the house, planted her favorite flowers, sunflowers and hibiscus, and set up a hammock where she could lie and sing without interruption. She had moments where she called the sun her son and the birds her children, but Destiny would sit with her still, nodding like it all made sense. For him, it did. One day, during one of her clearer afternoons, she looked around the house with a confused expression and asked, "Where's the roof made of sky?" Destiny smiled, held her hand, and said, "You're safe now, Mama." This is your house. Your destiny built it for you. She began to settle into her new life slowly. The nurses reported signs of mental healing, though damaged by years of neglect and untreated trauma. She started recognizing faces, responding to her name, and even remembering songs from the church children's department she once led. Destiny watched her blossom again, like a withered rose finding water. She asked one day if she still had her Bible. He bought her 3. She'd sit on the porch, reading aloud, half scripture, half fiction, but her voice was strong. Some journalists begged to interview her. He declined them all. She doesn't owe you her pain, he told one media house. He didn't want to see her when she slept under the bridge. Don't pretend to care now. His loyalty stunned the public. They began calling him Nigeria's most grateful son. But Destiny didn't do it for the cameras. He did it for the songs, for the laughter, for the broken woman who had once shielded him from the storms of this cruel world. One particular morning, Mama Grace wandered into the living room holding a wrapper. "I want to go to the market," she said. Destiny froze. He looked at her. Her hair was combed. Her feet, for once, were in slippers. Her eyes were focused. He walked up to her and asked, "Why the market?" She replied, "To find my child. I lost him there." Destiny knelt before her, placed her hand on his head, and said, "Mama, you found him. I'm here." Her lips trembled. She touched his cheeks. "Is it true? Are you my destiny?" He nodded, choking on tears. She dropped the wrapper, pulled him into her arms, and whispered, "Then I am not mad anymore. My child came back." And for the first time in over 20 years, she wept, not in confusion or pain, but in peace. The home was quiet, but filled with a sound more powerful than music, the sound of healing. It was a day like any other. Destiny was preparing Mama Grace's afternoon pap when he heard a knock at the gate. His security man rushed in, looking disturbed. "Oga, one madam say she be your real mama. She no one comment." Destiny frowned. "My mother is in the garden," he said calmly. But curiosity stirred. He stepped out to find a well-dressed woman in her late 40s, flanked by a man in a cheap suit. She wore expensive makeup, her skin well-oiled, and carried a purse worth more than what Mama Grace had earned in her whole life. "Destiny," she said with a trembling voice. "I know this is sudden, but I'm your biological mother." The world seemed to pause. He didn't speak. She continued, "I abandoned you, yes. Behind the market. I was poor, desperate. I hated myself for years. But I've seen your story. I recognized your face. The nose, the eyes, even the birthmark on your chest." Her lips trembled. "I'm sorry, my son." Destiny stood still, not out of shock, but out of restraint. The man beside her tried to hand him papers. "We can prove it, DNA, medical records. She's telling the truth." But Destiny wasn't asking for proof. He knew. Deep down he knew. She looked like him. Her voice, though richer now, echoed a distant cry in the market long ago. But as she reached out to touch him, he stepped back. "Why now?" he asked, his voice calm but sharp. "Where were you when I slept in drainages? When I was stoned by children? When I cried into gutters calling for a woman who gave me everything?" She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. "You see this house," he continued. "It's not mine. It belongs to the woman who picked me from the dirt. The woman you threw me away to die from." He pointed behind him. "She's singing in the garden. If you want to meet my mother, go kneel there." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I know I failed, but I want a second chance." Destiny shook his head slowly. "This isn't a movie. This isn't a fairy tale. My mother is not the one who gave me life. She's the one who made me want to live." The man tried again. "But you're rich now. Surely you can forgive." Destiny cut him off. "Richness is not what made me. It was sleeping beside a mad woman who taught me dignity without a single coin." He looked at her one last time. "You may have given me breath, but she gave me purpose. You want forgiveness? Pray for it. But don't expect me to forget the arms that wrapped me when yours abandoned me in mud." And with that, he walked back into the house, leaving the woman trembling by the gate. Inside, Mama Grace was humming again. And Destiny, without saying a word, walked up to her, sat beside her, and rested his head on her lap. Nothing else mattered now. He had chosen his mother. The days following the confrontation with his birth mother were heavy, not with confusion, but with conviction. Destiny sat in silence each night beside Mama Grace, watching her sleep peacefully beneath the soft humming of the ceiling fan. She was calmer now. The hallucinations came less frequently. She remembered more names from her past, even asking about her sister Patricia one day, a name Destiny had only read about in the journals he recovered from her old church records. He didn't tell her the full story of betrayal. What good would it do? She was healing, and for the first time in decades, her eyes no longer darted around in fear or paranoia. Destiny began preparing for something he'd put off for years, finalizing her place as his mother, not in word, but in law. He wanted the world to know who truly raised him. The woman who breastfed him in a market gutter, fought the government to keep him, and never stopped singing his name, even when her mind was lost to the world. He hired a lawyer and submitted adoption paperwork, an ironic but powerful act. In the eyes of the world, Destiny was an adult. He didn't need a legal mother. But in his heart, this wasn't about legality. It was about honor. The lawyer was baffled at first. "You want to legally declare a mentally ill woman your mother?" Destiny replied with a calm smile. "She's the only one who ever was." After a psychiatric evaluation confirmed that Mama Grace's lucidity was steadily returning, the process moved forward. Destiny invited a few witnesses from his past, teachers, former shelter staff, even the nurse who used to pity him during his foster care days. They came not out of obligation, but awe. Many had seen the boy grow from a dust-covered street child to a man of principle. One courtroom observer whispered, "He's turning shame into a crown." When the judge approved the adoption, Destiny stood and said quietly, "Thank you, Your Honor. But I've always known her name. She is my mother, Grace." The ceremony was small, intimate. No photographers, no journalists, just Destiny, Mama Grace, and a few people who had seen the journey from nothing to this moment. He gifted her a gold necklace inscribed with the word mother, and when he placed it around her neck, she looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Did I do well?" she asked in a soft voice. Destiny took her hand and kissed it. "You saved me. That's more than well." That evening, he cooked her favorite yam porridge, and they ate together while old gospel music played softly in the background. Destiny knew the world still called her mad. He didn't care. What the world failed to understand was that love doesn't need sanity. It only needs faith, sacrifice, and a memory that refuses to forget the hand that held you when everyone else let go. His decision wasn't for applause. It was a promise kept. And in keeping it, he had rewritten the meaning of motherhood. Mama Grace died in her sleep on a rainy Sunday morning, the same kind of weather that once soaked their cardboard shelter years ago behind the market. But this time, she was not lying in mud or curled beneath torn nylons. She was in a warm bed in clean pajamas, with the scent of hibiscus from the garden drifting through the open window. Destiny found her with a soft smile on her face, her hands folded gently on her chest, the necklace he gave her still around her neck. He didn't scream. He didn't weep immediately. He sat beside her, took her hand in his, and whispered, "You can rest now, Mama. You kept your promise, and I kept mine." Then he held her and hummed the lullaby she once sang to him. "Rain, rain, go away, my baby has no roof today." But this time, the song wasn't a cry for shelter. It was a goodbye and a thank you. Her burial was simple but dignified. No crowds, no cameras, just the ones who mattered. Destiny chose a small plot beneath a mango tree near a quiet stream just outside town. Her tombstone was carved with care. It read, "Grace Nwachukwu." She had nothing but love. She gave it all. She is the reason I lived. Destiny stood by the grave in silence as the earth covered the woman who had covered him with her body, her voice, and her madness. He didn't wear black. Instead, he wore white, believing that mourning shouldn't hide the light of the life she gave him. After the final shovel of soil, he placed one last item on her grave, the old rock she had given him when he was a boy. the one she called his protector. The same one he had carried through beatings, foster homes, loneliness, and redemption. It felt right that it returned to her. She had protected him long before he ever protected her. In her memory, destiny opened a quiet sanctuary. Not a charity, not a foundation, not a public campaign. Just a home. Grace's heart. A small shelter for mentally ill women and abandoned children. No press release. No ribbon cutting. Just open doors, warm beds, and arms that held without judgment. And he lived simply, far from the fame he once touched. Whenever people asked about his story, he would say, "I was raised by a woman the world called mad. But she was the sanest soul I ever met." And if they asked about his success, he would reply, "She is my success. I only built what she started." The world would remember Destiny as the boy who rose from dirt. But he never let them forget the woman who picked him from that dirt. He was no longer ashamed of the name they used to taunt him. He now wore it with pride, because he knew the truth. He was, and would forever be, the madwoman's son. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.